I wasn't suspicious. That's the part that still messes with me. Not in the dramatic way people expect. There was no moment where I felt my stomach drop for no reason. No late-night paranoia. No instinct telling me something was wrong. I didn't check her phone. I didn't track her location. I didn't read into silence. If anything, I felt secure. We'd been together for 2 years, and those 2 years felt settled, not boring, comfortable. The kind of comfort people mistake for certainty, the kind you trust without questioning. We lived together in a small apartment that always smelled faintly like laundry detergent and coffee. We had a couch with a dent where we both sat every night. We had routines that formed without discussion. Friday nights were takeout. Saturday mornings were slow. Sunday evenings were quiet. We had inside jokes no one else would understand. A shared playlist that followed us from road trips to grocery runs. Arguments that ended quickly because neither of us liked dragging things out. She used to say I was her safe place. Not in a dramatic way, not during fights. She'd say it casually, like it was obvious, like it didn't need to be earned anymore. And I believed her. So when people ask me now, did you feel it coming? The honest answer is no. I found out the truth by accident. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind you forget as soon as it's over. We both came home tired from work. I remember dropping my keys into the bowl by the door and feeling that familiar sense of relief. The day was over. She kicked off her shoes, stretched, and collapsed onto the couch without saying much. We weren't distant. We weren't cold. We were just tired. She scrolled through her phone while half watching a show we'd already seen before. Something light, background noise, the kind of show you don't really watch together, you just exist next to each other while it plays. I asked her what she wanted for dinner. She didn't look up. Anything, I don't care. That wasn't unusual. She really didn't care most days. She trusted me to choose. I reached for my phone to order food, and the screen stayed black. Dead. I sighed, plugged it in, and instinctively grabbed hers from the cushion beside me. She didn't flinch. That's important. Because if she had reacted even slightly, I might have stopped. If she'd said, "Oh, let me do it," or reached for it, or even glanced at me, my brain would have registered hesitation. But she didn't. She stayed relaxed, comfortable, absent. I unlocked the phone. I knew the code. We never hid our phones from each other. That had always been one of those unspoken signs of trust people talk about. I opened the food delivery app. That's when the notification slid down from the top of the screen. One message. From a name I didn't recognize. No emojis. No context. Just 7 words. Last night was a mistake, right? My body reacted before my mind did. My chest tightened. My breath caught. For a split second, my brain rushed in to protect me. It's nothing. Probably a wrong number. Maybe a coworker joke. Don't overreact. I've always been logical. I don't jump to conclusions. I pride myself on giving people the benefit of the doubt. I almost locked the phone and handed it back. Almost. But something felt off. My hands were cold. My heart was suddenly pounding too hard for a harmless message. I clicked the notification. The chat opened instantly. And immediately I knew. Not because of what was said, but because of how it was said. The familiarity. The rhythm. The way messages were spaced like two people who knew exactly when the other would respond. This wasn't new. This wasn't awkward. This was comfortable. The first thing I noticed wasn't even the words. It was the timestamps. Late nights. Early mornings. Times she told me she was asleep. Days she said she was too tired to talk. I scrolled slowly. Inside jokes that weren't ours. References to places she told me she'd gone with friends. Photos I had never seen before. Nothing explicit at first. No obvious proof. No clear betrayal. Just intimacy. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need explaining because it already belongs somewhere else. Then I saw it. The message that made my stomach drop. He has no idea. That was the moment my body went numb. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe properly. I stared at the screen while she sat beside me, scrolling through her own thoughts, unaware or pretending to be. I locked the phone, handed it back, and said pizza or Chinese. She answered without hesitation, like nothing had happened. That night I barely slept. The next morning felt unreal. Not dramatic, not heavy. Just off. She woke up before me like she always did. I heard her move around the bedroom, the quiet rustle of clothes, the bathroom light clicking on. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to sleep, listening to the routine we'd repeated 100 times. She brushed her teeth, checked her phone, hummed quietly. Nothing about her behavior suggested guilt. That was the first thing that scared me. When she leaned over to kiss my forehead before leaving for work, I almost pulled away. Not because I was angry, but because my body hadn't caught up to what my mind knew yet. "Have a good day," she said. "You too," I replied. The words felt automatic, like muscle memory. As soon as the door closed behind her, the apartment felt too quiet. The show we'd left paused on the TV screen was still there, frozen in the middle of a joke that wasn't funny anymore. I sat up and stared at the wall for a long time. I kept replaying the message in my head. Last night was a mistake, right? I tried to make sense of it. I tried to reframe it into something that wouldn't shatter the life we'd built. Maybe it was emotional, not physical. Maybe it happened once. Maybe it was already over. Every possibility my mind created had one goal: survival. Because accepting the truth meant accepting that I didn't know the person I slept next to. At work, I couldn't focus. I reread emails without absorbing them, stared at my screen until coworkers asked if I was okay. I said yes every time. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want advice. I wanted certainty. And I didn't have it yet. Around noon, she texted me. "Busy day, might be late tonight." That sentence had never meant anything before. Now it meant everything. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. I typed a response, deleted it, typed another, erased it again. Finally, I sent something neutral. "Okay." I hated myself for how small that word felt. That evening, I watched more carefully than I ever had before. She came home later than usual, smiling faintly, tossing her bag down like nothing was different. She asked about my day. I answered vaguely. We ate dinner together. She talked about work drama I'd heard before. I nodded in the right places. Her phone buzzed once. She didn't check it immediately. She waited. That detail stuck with me. She wasn't impulsive. She wasn't careless. She was practiced. That night, I didn't sleep much. I stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathing slow as she drifted off beside me. I wondered how long she'd been able to fall asleep next to me without feeling anything at all. I wondered if she ever felt guilty, or if guilt had faded into routine. Sometime after midnight, she rolled over and wrapped her arm around me, a reflex she'd done 1,000 times. I stayed still. I realized something then. If I confronted her now, she would cry. She would apologize. She would say it didn't mean anything. She would promise it was over. And a part of me, A dangerous part would want to believe her. That scared me more than the betrayal itself. So I waited. Over the next few days, I became an observer in my own relationship. I didn't accuse. I didn't test her. I didn't ask loaded questions. I just watched. I noticed how often she smiled at her phone, small, private smiles that disappeared when she noticed me looking. I noticed how she started placing her phone face down on the table, not dramatically, casually, as if it had always been that way. I noticed how she began taking calls in the other room. Nothing obvious, nothing undeniable. Just enough to confirm that I wasn't imagining it. One evening, she told me she was meeting friends after work. She leaned in and kissed my cheek before grabbing her keys. "Don't wait up," she said lightly. I didn't argue. I didn't ask who. I didn't follow up. I just nodded. After the door closed, I sat on the couch in silence. I realized how calm she sounded. Too calm. There was no hesitation in her voice, no guilt tucked between words. She didn't seem nervous about lying. She seemed practiced. She came home late. Later than she said she would. She didn't smell like alcohol, didn't look exhausted, didn't act like someone who'd been out for hours. She looked satisfied. That was the moment something in me shifted. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Clarity. I understood then that whatever this was, it wasn't new. It wasn't confusing. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. A week passed. I said nothing. Then she made a mistake. She left her phone in the bathroom one morning. Unlocked. I noticed it immediately. It sat on the counter, screen dimming slowly, like it was waiting for me. I stood in the doorway for a long time. My heart was pounding so loudly it felt intrusive. I told myself I didn't need to look again. I already knew enough. But knowing enough isn't the same as knowing everything. And deep down, I needed to see the truth clearly, not the softened version my mind kept offering. I picked it up. This time I didn't rush. I opened the messages slowly, bracing myself. And that's when everything fell into place. Plans made weeks in advance. Dates that overlapped with nights she said she was working late. Jokes about how easy it was. They talked about how comfortable it felt, how careful they'd been, how long they'd managed to keep it quiet. Months. Not days. Not weeks. Months. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, phone heavy in my hands. She wasn't confused. She wasn't tempted. She wasn't struggling. She was comfortable. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself. That night, she climbed into bed beside me and fell asleep almost instantly. I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts finally slowing into something steady and cold. I realized something terrifying. If I confronted her now, she'd cry. She'd apologize. She'd promise it meant nothing. And a part of me, the part that loved her, would want to believe her. So I didn't give myself that chance. The decision didn't come all at once. There wasn't a dramatic moment where I stood up and said, "That's it." There was no rush of adrenaline, no shaking hands. It arrived quietly, like something I'd already known for a while, finally catching up to me. The morning after I read everything, I went to work like nothing had happened. I showered, got dressed, made coffee. We stood in the kitchen together while it brewed, moving around each other without touching. She talked about a meeting she was nervous about. I nodded and listened. I even offered advice. I hated how normal I sounded. Before she left, she asked if I wanted anything from the store later. "Milk," I said automatically. The door closed behind her, and I stood there holding my mug long after the coffee went cold. That's when it hit me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken in the way movies show, sobbing, shouting, collapsing. I felt detached, like I'd already stepped out of the relationship emotionally, and my body just hadn't followed yet. And that scared me more than anything. For the rest of that week, I behaved the same way I always had. I laughed at the right moments. I asked about her day. I slept beside her. But something fundamental had shifted. I stopped imagining a future with her. No more mental pictures of trips we'd take. No more vague thoughts about where we'd live next year. No more assumptions that she'd be there by default. The future went quiet. And once that happened, the rest felt inevitable. She noticed something was different. Not immediately, but slowly. She started asking if I was okay more often, watching my face when she spoke, reaching for me a little longer than usual. I think part of her sensed the distance. But she didn't ask the real question, because asking would mean risking the truth. One night, she tried to initiate a conversation. "You've been quiet lately," she said, sitting across from me at the table. I shrugged, just tired. She watched me carefully. Did I do something? There it was. I could have ended it right there. I could have told her everything I knew, could have forced the confrontation, demanded explanations, asked questions I didn't actually want the answers to. Instead, I said no. And that was when I knew. I wasn't staying to fix this. I was staying to leave cleanly. I started preparing quietly. I didn't tell friends. I didn't vent. I didn't ask for advice. I needed this decision to be mine alone, unshaped by opinions, unsoftened by sympathy. I sorted through my things late at night while she slept. I decided what mattered and what didn't, what I'd take and what I'd leave behind. It was strange how easy it was to separate my life from hers, once I stopped pretending it was shared. The night before I left, she fell asleep quickly, her back turned toward me. I watched the rise and fall of her breathing and felt something unexpected. Not for the betrayal, but for the clarity it forced on me. If this hadn't happened, I might have stayed. I might have settled. I might have ignored things I couldn't quite name. Instead, I was awake, fully, calmly, finally. The next morning, I packed. Not everything, just what mattered. Clothes, documents, a few personal things she wouldn't notice missing right away. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I moved with intention. When I finished, I placed my bags by the door and sat down to wait. She came home that evening like she always did. Keys in the bowl, shoes kicked off, bag dropped. Then she saw the bags. She froze. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice sharp with confusion. I stood up slowly. "I know," I said. At first she laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "Knew what?" I didn't elaborate. Her expression shifted. Confusion turned to annoyance, annoyance to fear. She asked questions. I didn't answer them. Then she denied it. For about 30 seconds. That's all it took. Then the tears came. Apologies followed, then explanations, then justifications. She said it didn't mean anything. She said it was a mistake. She said she never planned for it to go that far. I listened without interrupting. When she finally stopped talking, I said calmly, "That's the problem. It did mean something." She reached for me. I stepped back. I didn't yell. I didn't insult her. I didn't argue. I picked up my bags and walked out. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. I sat in my car for a few minutes before starting it, letting the silence settle. For the first time since that Tuesday night, my chest didn't feel tight. It felt clear. I didn't go far. I drove aimlessly for a while, letting the city lights blur past the windshield, trying to understand how something that had taken 2 years to build could end in less than an hour. Eventually, I parked. I sat there with the engine off, phone in my lap, staring at the dark screen like it might start vibrating at any second. It didn't. Not right away. For a moment, I felt nothing. No relief. No sadness. No anger. Just stillness. It was unsettling, like standing in the quiet after something loud has stopped and your ears are still ringing. I slept that night on a friend's couch. I didn't explain much. I just said things ended. They didn't ask questions, and I appreciated that more than they probably knew. The messages started the next morning. They were careful at first. "Can we talk? I just want to explain. Please don't do this like this." I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I knew if I engaged, even a little, the conversation would spiral into something I'd already decided not to revisit. As the day went on, the tone shifted. Apologies turned into defensiveness. Regret turned into frustration. She wanted closure. I realized something then. She didn't want to understand why I left. She wanted me to help her feel better about what she'd done. That night, alone in a borrowed bed, the doubt crept in. Not about whether she cheated, but about whether I'd handled it the right way. I replayed the moment I said, "I know." Should I have asked questions? Should I have demanded honesty? Should I have given her a chance to explain? The doubts were persistent, logical, reasonable. They whispered that walking away without a conversation was cowardly, that silence was unfair, that relationships deserved effort even at the end. I almost believed them. The next day, she left a voicemail. Her voice sounded different, softer. She said she missed me. She said she loved me. She said she was confused and hurting. And for a moment, I felt it, the pull. The familiar urge to fix things, to comfort, to step back into the role I'd played for so long. But then I remembered something. She hadn't sounded confused when she was lying. She hadn't sounded unsure when she was making plans. She hadn't sounded guilty when she thought I had no idea. That memory steadied me. Over the following weeks, the messages slowed. Not because she understood, but because reality set in. People noticed. Mutual friends reached out carefully, choosing their words like they were navigating something fragile. Some told me I was strong. Others hinted that maybe I'd been too harsh. A few suggested that if I really loved her, I would have fought harder. Those comments lingered longer than the rest. They made me question whether leaving quietly had been avoidance disguised as self-respect. But then the clarity returned slowly, consistently. I noticed how peaceful my days felt without the undercurrent of doubt I hadn't realized was there. I noticed how I slept better, how my thoughts weren't constantly circling around someone else's behavior. I noticed how I didn't miss her as much as I missed the idea of what I thought we had. And that distinction mattered. One evening, weeks later, she sent a final message. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Just, "I guess this is really it." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied, "It is." That was all. After that, there was nothing. No dramatic ending. No final confrontation. No closure speech. Just space. And time. It took me a while to understand that walking away quietly wasn't weakness. It was restraint. I didn't need her confession to validate what I already knew. I didn't need answers that wouldn't change the outcome. I didn't need to hear her regret to justify my boundary. I'd already chosen myself. Time does strange things to memories. At first, everything feels sharp. Moments replay themselves with painful clarity. the good and the bad overlapping until it's hard to separate what was real from what you hoped was. Then slowly the edges soften. Not because you forget, but because you finally see things the way they were, not the way you wanted them to be. That's what happened to me. Weeks passed, then months. Life didn't dramatically improve overnight. There was no sudden happiness, no immediate sense of freedom, just quiet adjustments, new routines forming where old ones used to be. I cooked for one. I slept diagonally across the bed. I stopped checking my phone for messages that weren't coming anymore. And somewhere in all of that, I started noticing things I'd ignored before. I realized how often I had made myself smaller to keep things easy. How often I'd let things slide because I didn't want conflict. How I'd accepted vague answers because I trusted her, not because they made sense. I wasn't blind. I was accommodating. There's a difference. Looking back, the betrayal didn't start with cheating. It started with distance I explained away. Moments where she chose convenience over honesty, where she prioritized comfort over clarity. At the time, I called that compromise. Now I recognize it as imbalance. People assume that waiting, not confronting immediately, means fear. That silence means avoidance. But what I was doing wasn't freezing. It was listening. To my instincts. To patterns. To the parts of myself I'd been ignoring. Confrontation would have been emotional. Waiting was informative. I learned something important during that time. Closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from acceptance. No explanation she could have given me would have made betrayal easier to carry. No apology would have erased months of deception. What gave me peace was knowing I left with clarity, not confusion. I don't hate her. That surprises people. I don't think she's evil. I don't believe she set out to hurt me. I think she got comfortable lying and forgot that comfort doesn't make something right. And I think I stayed longer than I should have because I confused familiarity with loyalty. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was trusting myself again afterward. Trusting that I didn't imagine things. Trusting that my quiet decision was valid. Trusting that walking away without chaos didn't make me weak. It made me deliberate. Now, when people ask if I regret not confronting her sooner, I answer honestly. No. Because if I had confronted her immediately, I might have stayed. I might have accepted tears and promises instead of truth. I might have traded certainty for comfort. And I know myself well enough to admit that. Walking away quietly wasn't about dignity. It was about preservation. I left before resentment turned me into someone I didn't recognize. I left before love turned into negotiation. I left while I still respected myself. Sometimes the strongest response isn't confrontation. It's clarity. People still ask me if I would do anything differently. They ask if, knowing everything now, I would have confronted her the moment I saw that first message. If I would have demanded honesty. If I would have fought harder for the relationship. I understand why they ask. Confrontation feels active. Silence feels passive. But that's not how it felt from the inside. From the inside, waiting wasn't hesitation. It was alignment. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because the version of myself who stayed silent that week was finally listening, not to fear, not to pride, but to clarity. I saw the relationship without urgency for the first time. No need to fix it. No need to save it. No need to be chosen. Just the truth sitting there uncomplicated. I think a lot of people stay too long because they believe leaving has to be loud to be justified. They think walking away requires proof, explanations, witnesses. But sometimes knowing is enough. Sometimes The moment you stop explaining your pain to the person who caused it is the moment you start healing. I don't regret not asking questions. Questions would have given her a voice in a story she'd already rewritten without me. I don't regret not hearing her reasons. Reasons don't undo patterns. And I don't regret leaving quietly. Because quiet didn't mean weak. It meant finished. The truth is, the relationship didn't end the night I walked out with my bags. It ended the moment I realized I wasn't a participant anymore, just an observer waiting for permission to leave. And once I gave myself that permission, everything else followed naturally. If there's anything I took from this, it's this. You don't owe people access to your healing. You don't owe explanations to those who chose comfort over honesty. And you don't have to burn bridges to walk away from them. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is leave without trying to win the argument. So when people ask me now, was it wrong to wait? I tell them the truth. Waiting gave me certainty. Certainty gave me peace. And peace was worth more than any confrontation ever could have been. So I'll ask you the same thing. If you were in my place, would you have confronted immediately? Or would you have waited and walked away quietly?